Welcome to all of you for our session today on mastering difficult interview questions. My name is Deborah Shea and I'm a career coach in the CDO. So although employers might have different approaches to their interview process, most behavioral questions that we'll discuss today are pretty similar across roles and levels and across industries. So in this webinar, we're going to review some of the common behavioral interview questions, speak about some of the motivations behind the questions that the interviewers ask, talk about some strategies perhaps that you can incorporate into your interviews, and really try to set you up for delivering your interview in the highest way for the highest results. So just some logistics for our time together. So you have been through these programs before, but I am very open for anyone to ask any questions. So please feel free to use the Zoom Q&A feature for any questions that come up along the way, and I will do my very best to answer them at the end of our session. You will also have the opportunity at any time after this session to reach out in a one-on-one if there anything of a particular nature that you'd like to discuss in more depth. You can set up a one-on-one coaching appointment with me or any one of my colleagues. So this session will be recorded and it will be shared directly with those of you who are on today. Should you wish to review some points that you want to have a little bit of extra thought and time around. And it will be loaded into the alumni career webinar series library, hopefully by the beginning of next week. So, and that's again, you can click on the top. There's a top navigation bar where you can click on your career, then your career resources and recorded webinars to receive this if you want to see it at any other time beyond today. So, okay, so Kayla has the link for all of us. So for our agenda, we're going to talk about 4 main areas. We are going to talk about why interviewers ask tough questions, and we're actually going to talk about some interview questions and potential answers, and then we're going to go through a prep framework and then have some wrap up and Q&A time. So I'm going to just assume that many of you with me today are very, very skilled at preparing for interviews. You've all had your fair share, and I'm going to assume that many of you have been very prepared going into your meetings, but there might have been some where you walked out thinking, gosh, why did they ask me that? I've never been posed with that question before. Wow, that was kind of strange. So we are going to talk about some of the interview questions that you might say, that's kind of a unique question. We're going to talk about the different reasons why interviewers ask what they do. They could be looking to gauge your skill level for a particular position, your experience, your fit. They might also want to see how much research you've done on this particular role or about the company at large. So the companies are really looking to get to know you at a deeper level beyond the one-dimensional resume that they have in front of them. They want to know what you're like beyond maybe some of the prepared responses that you have. Interviewers, I'm sure you have all come across this, interviewers also toss out what you think is a really great response. And they might say, yeah, I've heard that one before, give me another one. And you're thinking, oh my God, how can I access another one right now? But that's where you're going. We're going to talk about this a little bit further down the road, but that's where you have to just be aware that anything goes during an interview. So there are some left of center questions that you might also be, in need of preparing for. You might have had these in your own situations where they might say, okay, you've got a dinner party, and who's one person, living or dead, that you would like to invite to your mix, and why? You've just won $50 million in lotto. What would you do with the money? Another one might be that a genie has just granted you with superpowers. What kind of superpower would you like to have, and why? So you might think, what does this have to do with the job at hand? But it has everything to do with a hiring manager trying to elicit what your personality is like, what your communication skills are like. They just want to get a feel for you and kind of break up the normal and customary interview process. So the themes that an interviewer could ask could be very wide ranging. It could be anything from communication to customer service to leadership to working in cross-functional teams. All of those combined are going to really give employers a pretty good feel and a good sense of what you would be like as a team member. Would you be a good asset to the group? And especially when we're in a market where it might be a tough, tough to break through in a particular industry. It might be a small niche industry where there might be a lot of people going for the same job. You want to be able to differentiate yourself, and you want to be able to stand out in the best way. So when we look at the interview prep and framework, there are going to be some questions that might be posed that actually would be lead into a story. So when you hear an interviewer say, tell me about a time when, share a situation where, give me an example of, you're going to have to switch into the STAR method. And I'm sure a lot of you have gone through this training through the CDO or at SOM, where you've had to either create your bullets in that STAR format or the SAR format, and to really be thoughtful about how you're going to actually communicate these kinds of responses in a way that's clean and clear for you to be able to deliver and for the interviewer to be able to receive. So this is where you as an interviewee perhaps could really shine, and where you're going to be able to hit all the right notes and the right angles by going through the various steps. You're going to provide what happened in the situation, describe what that was like, what did you do to address the situation, and then what were the results, what happened at the end of all of this. So really, it's a surefire way for you to communicate all of this. It's great for you to be able to have this framework. So you're like, okay, I'm going to tell them what was going on. I'm going to tell them what I did. I'm going to tell them what the end result was. It's really good and clear for you to be able to deliver that, so that you're not walking through, various fields and finally getting to your point. It really keeps you on track, and it helps you from veering off course. So here is a visual of what the STAR method actually looks like. So here we've got situation, task, action, and result. So for the situation, you're going to be asked to give a brief description of the circumstances that you faced. The task is describing the level of your responsibility in the situation or project. The action describes the actions that you took to address the situation. It could be analysis. It could be whatever decision-making process that you had to go through. And it could be resources that you had to employ. And then finally, the result. Now, many times the result could be qualitative in nature, but I would really stress that if there's a way that you can add in a marker or a measurement component. You increase revenue by X percent, you save the department or division Y money. Whatever you can do to add in those elements are really, really good markers for the interviewer to hear. So here's an example of how a star response could look like. So my colleague and I were working together on a time-sensitive assignment, and I noticed that he missed an important deadline. When I approached him about the progress on the assignment, he became very upset and stormed off. I scheduled some time for us to meet, and he explained that he was overwhelmed with competing deadlines from other projects. I offered to assist with any additional assignments, and together we successfully divided the tasks to get back on track. I scheduled check-in meetings in the remaining days before the final deadline, so we were always on the same page, and we ended up completing the project on time. So here's an example. I addressed what the situation was, what tasks and actions needed to happen, and what the end result was. And it was a very, very fluid way to describe that on point. So many of you use your own way of figuring out, well, how many stories do I need? You know, a lot of interviewees and a lot of students here ask, well, how many stories should I prepare? You know, it's really going to be to your benefit to have a full understanding of what all of the components or the needs of the job are, from the function, from the skills, from the requirements. And hopefully by your having maybe a coffee chat or an informational interview, you'll be able to glean a little bit more from those kinds of conversations. But my suggestion would be in that top, the top bars going across the comp 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, to put in whatever skills and functions you think are going to be necessary for the job. And then listing on the left where you see story 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth, you want to put in your stories. So you might have a leadership story, a collaboration story, a cross-functional story, a persuasion story. And you want to be able to say, okay, that's a great story for this particular competency. That's a great story for that one. And then you're going to see in your sums, you know, where your stories line up, and making sure that you have enough for each of these different components. But where else might you be lacking? Oh, I need more stories. I'm really, really short and thin on stories that have a measurement component and an analytical component. I know that's also a feature of this job. I need to be more thoughtful there, and I need to start thinking about what else I can incorporate. So, you know, it's also a note that interviewers, you know, if you're meeting with 1, 2, or 3 interviewers, they're going to talk to each other, and they're going to say, well, what did Jane provide for you as a response to this leadership question? And if you have the same stories for each person, it's okay, but it's not as rich, it's not as full. So that's why I would say to have a few stories that maybe you can share, one with this person, another with this person, and also note that your stories might have a broader span. So if you say, oh yes, you know, I did tell you about a particular situation regarding a difficult colleague, but let me tell you, you know, that also kind of fits into your question regarding cross-functional team leadership. So you can talk about that and maybe give a little nuance or give a little bit more color on a story that you've already shared. So don't worry about that. But again, I would have many stories that, again, write them out and say them out loud so you can hear yourself. But I think that this is a way for you to at least have some have some framework around your prep before going into a formal interview. So we have a few different types of what we call tough questions. So they can range from introspective questions to research-based, cell, gap, and finally to personal interest. So here we've got introspective questions. What is something people might think, assume about you that is incorrect? Tell me about a time you failed, and what is your greatest weakness? So the goal with these questions is to test how self-aware you are, but also how open you are to talking about your flaws. We all have them. So it's really about that balance between coming across as comfortable and confident, but also saying, yeah, it's really something that I've done, but I don't spend that much time on. You can talk about that and be real about it, as long as it's not like the #1 bullet on the job description. Here's a potential response to the assumptions question. So people assume I struggle to make decisions, but the reality is that I like to know all the facts first. It takes me time to gather data and feedback, but it helps me make the right decision, which I think is better than making a quick and wrong decision. So the tell me about a time you failed question, it's very interesting because you don't want to share something that's going to sabotage your ability to move forward in the interview process. And you don't want to be tempted by saying, I've never failed. That comes across as being, having a lack of self-awareness. But I'll just share this with you, that there's an author named Peggy McKee who wrote a book called Career Confidential. And she suggests that the failure question is very different from the weakness question. She said a weakness is a flaw in yourself that could affect your work in the future. And failure is a temporary event that doesn't have to happen again. And as long as you're humble enough to learn from that, hopefully that won't be repeated. So there's a nuance there between failure and weakness. So, if someone has asked you, tell me about your strengths. What are you best at? What are you known for? What do people recognize in you? Those are all ways to cloak the strengths question. So if those questions are asked, you can be quite certain that on the flip side, tell me about your greatest weakness is going to come follow. So the big red flag is when you share a strength that's disguised as a weakness. For example, saying you're a workaholic or a perfectionist. So, the interviewer wants you to, be mindful of your weakness, again, looking that it's not critical to the components of the job. But you want to also end on a hopeful note so that you can also say that, I'm working on this, or I'm taking a class on that, or I'm working on projects that expand my depth and breadth in this particular area. Those are all perfectly within your realm to talk about. But, just to have that in your mind that, employers will ask these questions, and just to be as prepared as possible will be to your benefit. So the next are the introspective questions, the work style. So what do you dislike about your current job, and what motivates you? So there's a lot packed into these two questions. Employers want to know, are you perhaps an independent worker? Or do you prefer working in teams? Do you excel in group projects? Or do you like to, work on your own, give me what I need to do and let me go off and do it? Thank you very much. Are you aware of how you work best? What really motivates you? So for example, the question about what do you dislike about your current role? You already know this, but I'm just going to say it out loud, that do not diss your company or the employers or your boss. So take that classic, it's it's not them, it's me approach. You know, talk about your strongest skills, talk about your own career goals, talk about some projects that you loved working on that you didn't have as much time to really expand on. Maybe there was a project that you were invited on for one or two projects, and then you went back to your day to day. Maybe that was something that you say, oh, I love that. I would love to do a little bit more of that. I'd love to spend more time there, but maybe there's no opportunity for you to do that kind of work in your current role or your current company. So talk about that in terms of what is working, but what you would like to be doing more of. And again, that's, when you talk about what you would like to be doing more of, what motivates you, you go back to what you're best at, you go back to what you're excited about, you go back to what you're recognized for, what you believe, where you believe your value is. And you talk about it in terms of how you believe this particular role that you're interviewing for can help you grow and develop. That's awesome. But the PS of all of that is, as an interviewer, it's going to come back to, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for my team? What are you going to do for the company? So you have to figure out how you answer that and how you respond to the motivation piece, as really looking forward to this job, could see this really enhancing my future career goals and so forth. Wonderful, wonderful. That's what I'm doing for you. What are you doing for me or the team? And so just really be mindful of that. So, again, if you're looking for, say, an operations focused role, you want to ensure that your motivations are harmonious with the responsibilities of the job description. And your answer is going to be an indicator if you'll enjoy and or succeed in the role. So here's how something could flow. Not only do I work well under pressure, but I am motivated by meeting deadlines. The process of setting deadlines and exceeding those benchmarks gives me a sense of accomplishment throughout the duration of a long project. I recently spearheaded a 6-week project and set up small milestones to keep me accountable and on track. Completing each checkpoint not only kept me organized, but also motivated and excited about my progress. So hopefully you see how that can maybe work out in your particular personal experience. So now we get into research-based questions. If hired, what would you like to change about our company or department, and what's your desired salary? So these are both kind of loaded questions. So the if I hired you question, this is one where you're going to have to look to see, do I have enough information to be able to respond to this question with some intelligence here. You could ask for clarifying questions. You might even say, based upon what I've read, based upon what I saw on your site, you're expanding into e-learning as well as live events. Is that something that you're planning to do in the next few months? You could ask a clarifying question there. And if the interviewer says, yeah, we're thinking in the next quarter that this is something that we're going to launch. Okay, so now you have that info. In that case, I would say that I'd want to put a good portion of the marketing budget into that because of X, Y, and Z. It also, every interviewer likes to hear, before I commit to this question, which is a very big question, I want to talk to the stakeholders or those who are closest to this project to really get a feel for what's working, what's not, to understand the expectations of the stakeholders. So that's also fair for you to respond in that particular way. For the, for another example, I can give you a quick example of my thought process for where I would start, given that I don't have all of the details. You can do that as well. In my experience, before you spend $1, it's important to learn what the goals are for the company and how they will be measured. For me, I would take inventory of what's working, what's not, da, da, da. So you can answer that question in a way to say, based upon what I do know, based upon what I've read, based upon what I've seen in the trades, based upon what I've gleaned from the people on your team. You can reference those kinds of things, that you don't have to come up with something fresh on your own. So asking about desired salary can be tricky for some. Some hiring managers come right out and ask what you expect to be paid. You should have a range in your head. You could use various salary tools, including the salary project, and you should also have a pretty clear explanation as to the why you would be worth what you are asking. So you could say, for example, I do have a salary range in mind based on my research and taking into account my 10+ years of PR experience. I believe my experience level and qualifications and multiple PR awards add value to my candidacy. However, I really want to wait to share my range until I learn a little bit more about the full scope of responsibilities and expectations. I have no doubt that if this is a mutual fit, that we can determine a fair salary number. So if you're comfortable sharing your range or a number, go for it. But if you're not exactly sure, because sometimes what's on the website or on a job description could be a little richer, could be a little bit more enhanced, could have changed in the 2 or 3 weeks or month that particular post showed up on their site. So it's okay to say that you would like a little bit more time to understand more fully what the role requires. So some sell questions: why should we hire you? Why do you want to work here? And where do you see yourself in 5 years? These are all questions that I would say 95% of organizations ask. You want to be mindful of, again, that line between being self-assured, why should we hire you, communicating your qualifications and so on and so forth, and your enthusiasm for this particular space, or what this company is known for, and the leadership that they hold on the street or in the marketplace, the products that they represent, the sustainability that they walk and talk, whatever that might be. But you want to be able to just toggle, between your excitement and your motivation and so forth, and your communication of the whys, without being cocky. So you don't want to turn a perfectly great interview into a manager saying, wait, this guy's ego is like, whoop, as big as Texas. I don't know, this person could be too big for us, or this person might not be as much of a team player as I thought, or as I had hoped. So again, you want to be mindful of how you're coming across. Is your enthusiasm appropriate? Is it the we versus the I? And why do you want to work here? 100% companies ask that. So, it's a very, very, very common question. They want to determine the right fit here. Through your research and even the current interview, you should have a pretty good sense, pretty good grasp of the company, where it's really hitting the mark, where it's struggling. And you can answer, your answer could focus uniquely on what you can bring to the party to to tackle some of those issues, or what this particular company or this particular role can do to enhance your future goals. But it could be that this particular company is known for its place in the market. Whatever those responses are, I think that it's just kind of measuring it just to be able to provide a really good sense of your excitement and enthusiasm, and why your skills would be a good fit for the role, why you'd be a good leader for the team, why you'd be a good fit for this group, what you believe that you could bring to this group, what you're excited about. All of those fall into here. And then where do you see yourself in 5 years? I mean, that's a tricky one, because the landscape changes a lot. It changes depending on what industry you're in. Tech changes really, really quickly. You want to be able to just look at saying something that really is meaningful. Yeah, you do want to talk a little bit about where you can see your career going, but you also want to talk about, it's not like companies want to lock you in to say, okay, this person's going to be here for 5 years and that's what we're expecting. It doesn't necessarily mean that. What employers are looking for is, can we see your commitment? Can we see that you're going to have a high work ethic? Can we see that this job is relevant to your future goals? So whatever those future goals are, wonderful. The fact that your future goals map, that this position maps to your future goals is really great, because the greater the relevance, the more likely you're going to work hard, the more excited you're going to be, and the greater your addition to the team will be. So all of those kind of meld in, but just don't feel like, oh my God, they're looking for me to say XYZ position. You don't have to go there, but it's more of a sense of energy. This feels really synergistic to my longer term goals of X, Y, and Z. But you don't have to say, I want to be here, and then I want to go here, and then I want to do. You don't have to do that. But I think it's more of an umbrella about where you could see yourself potentially down the road. So here are some gap questions. Now, I have talked to students, to alums who have taken some time off. A lot of people have had lives that have been upended during the pandemic for a whole host of reasons. So employers want to address it, though. And I think that you should not feel strange about it, embarrassed about it. Just deal with it honestly. Whatever the reasons were, maybe you've had to take care of loved ones. Maybe because of the pandemic, you had to be there for your children to make sure that they were being, schooled properly in a remote setting. Maybe there was relocation involved. Maybe you took a class during your downtime. Maybe you did some volunteer work. Maybe you took time off to really say, what's it all about, and to really give yourself some time to be contemplative and thoughtful about your next step. And all of these are relevant. I met with someone whose parent was dealing with some difficult medical issues, and that's all really relevant, and it's very heartfelt, and it's real, and if we're not impacted personally, we know people who have been in this situation. So whatever those reasons are where you have taken time off, have your story ready that that makes sense, that is truthful, and maybe there's something that you can provide that provide the interviewer that would lead to a learning. Maybe doing some homeschooling and pulling away from your normal day-to-day was actually a great experience. Maybe you started freelancing. Maybe you started a business out of your home. And maybe it's something that you're saying, wow, I quickly realized that this fascinated me and I wanted to do more or learn more. And that's why I'm here. Maybe somebody was laid off during the pandemic and had a chance to be with family, had a chance to take care of a family member. Maybe that person got a chance to kind of teach and be more of a project manager. And that's why they incorporated some of those skill sets on a resume. Whatever the reason, make it into a learning for you, whether it was something that was near and dear to your heart or something that propelled you perhaps into a new way of looking at your career. So the next is the personal interest questions. What are you currently reading and what does an ideal workday look like? You have probably heard these or have received these questions before in an interview. And again, they're not going to judge you for the books that you're reading, but I think it's just a way for the interviewer to get to know you a little bit more personally. So feel free to include some details about a current novel or memoir that's on your nightstand. This is a great way, again, to show your personality. You can say, for fun, I've been reading a book called Such a Fun Age, but I'm also an avid reader of blogs and subscribe to XYZ kinds of newsletters. You can say that you most recently read an article in the LA Times about Gen Z, You can talk about your personal, then you can move into business if it makes sense to talk about something that's relevant. But again, this is more about the interviewer trying to get to know you a little bit. And then what does an ideal day look like? This is also one that you have to balance out because there might be some subtle expectations of a team or a company that you might not even be aware of. So if people don't take lunches on your team, or maybe they stay late, or maybe they come in, a couple of Saturdays in the morning to do work, you should know those kinds of things and have that information before you meet with a hiring manager. So, you don't want to say, yeah, I'd really like to run a few miles during lunch, or, I really don't look at my emails. Once I leave the office, that's it. And then, I'll tend to the emails in the morning when I come in. You might want to make sure that that's checked to see whether or not that's going to fly on a particular team. But you can also say, in an ideal universe, that the work-life balance, something that we'd all love all the time. But you also realize that there will be many times when, the checking of the emails is customary at night, or doing some work at night is customary. So you want to be able, again, to put in your personal preference. Maybe it's something where you'd like to run a couple of nights a week. Maybe you play tennis or bike ride or something. That's all great to incorporate, but you have to understand what the vibe is of the team that you're hoping to join, that it would fit in nicely with their schedule as well. So we talked a lot about various quote unquote difficult questions, and this list is not complete. And here are some others that we've also thought that would be good for you to incorporate into your arsenal. What critical feedback have you received in the past? How do you handle stress? That's a big one. How do you define success? That's an interesting one because you can take a lot of different paths for that one, can't you? what management style works best for you. So I think that that's an interesting one, because you can be looking at yourself, management, what's the management style above you? How do you work best with a manager that you report to? Do you like to have autonomy? Do you like to have frequent check-ins? Um, what's that kind of dynamic, and how has that worked for you in the past? Also, what kind of manager do you want to be for your team? Are you someone who's like, don't bother me unless the world is on fire? Or are you the kind of manager that says, you know what, I don't want to hear surprises, let's just meet regularly, we'll meet one-on-one every couple of weeks as a team, we'll meet once a week or a couple of times during the week, just so that we can all know what's happening in each other's world. Whatever your style is, I would be really clear about that in your delivery. How do you deal with conflict? I think that comes up for any of us. Again, it's above, below, and across the organization. How do you deal with it with senior managers? How do you deal with it with colleagues? And how do you deal with conflict with your direct reports? And what's your greatest personal achievement? I think that that's an interesting one. And again, it doesn't have to be work related. It can be that you climbed some mountain, or you won some award, or you taught your child how to ride a bike. Whatever feels right to you. I think it's a showcase of who you are personally. So here we get into some of the interesting pieces of how the Career Resources Group can help and support you along the way. There's a lot of different things that might come up in your world. So wherever you are in your career journey, we want to make sure that you know that we are here to help and support you. So if you're considering a future change, or actively seeking a role now, or contemplating a career shift in the future, we want to be able to help you. And here are some things that we can potentially talk about. Networking. Oh my God, this is the number one piece that is so valuable that people are reticent to tap into. And I promise you that the Yale SOM network is rich and wide. So if there's a way that you can tap into this network more fully, I promise you that people are willing to provide some perspective and guidance. It's a really great way for you to start building out your connection points. Talking about the hidden job market, storytelling. Again, there's a lot that can go into that, starting with tell me about yourself, and then all of those other stories that we talked about, leadership and working in cross-functional teams and persuasion and so on and so forth. Then job targeting, your offer, maybe there are components of your offer that you want to make sure that are incorporated. You want to make sure that it's competitive. We can look at resume strategies, unpacking job descriptions, and then intention setting. Why are you going for this particular job? What is it about it that resonates with you? How does this particular job fit into your long-term plan? To be intentional about your process. Executive search, behavioral interviewing, which we talked about here, but there's lots more to go. Negotiating and sustaining momentum. So there's a lot that you can tap into. And again, you can find this all through Yale SOM's alumni portal, and through the link that Kayla provided in the Q&A. So there's a lot that we can talk about in one-on-ones at a future date that's convenient for you. So here we get into the wrap up. And for anybody who has questions, I just ask you, feel free to load your questions into the Q&A section, and I can hopefully answer them for you. Okay, so here's one. When having to answer questions that require confidence and self-assurance, how do we avoid seeming arrogant? I sometimes you can use the third person, Santiago. Sometimes you can say from from my experience, this is what I've received in my performance reviews. These are some of the, I'm really proud that the feedback has been X and Y from my managers. You can use that. It doesn't seem like, you're pounding your chest. But I think that if you come across with some humility to say, I've worked really hard to learn X, Y, and Z. I've put in a lot of time to become more of an expert in this particular area. It's okay to start off with that, and I hope that makes sense to you, Santiago, that you can use that third party, or you can also talk about the fact that you have put in the time, you have put in the work that has brought you here. And as long as you're conveying it in a really professional manner, I'm sure that it will be received in that tone. So thank you for that. So here's another one. These constructs are great to ground an interviewee in how to prepare. When I interview candidates, I look for authenticity to dig beneath the practiced responses. What's your advice for how interviewees should show their human selves, not just their incisive, automatic, practiced answers, so it sounds real rather than rote? Yeah, so those are, I'm not sure who submitted this, but that's a great question. And I think that those kinds of things, you could ask those left of center questions and insert them and, kind of make a joke of it, just to see how you can break up the, the normal and customary, interviewer asks, the interviewer responds kinds of things, and the tell me about this and tell me about a time, and oh my gosh, that must have, that really seems like it was, a daunting experience. Tell me a little bit more about that. You can dig a little deeper than one question, so you can go further. You can, go in, well, who else was there, and what were the, who was in the room, what decision makers were with you? Oh my goodness, that sounded like a big project. How, how many components were there? And then you start to find out, well, what was your role in it? And to really get further and further down, to really understand the thought process of a particular individual. So I think all of those are great. And also those left of center questions, I think, are really, really kind of cool and really fun, and it gives you an opportunity to see the real person. I always start, because I started in HR, but when I looked at a resume, I would go all the way down to the bottom, and I would see under additional information. I would look there and start there. And maybe it was somebody who was an avid skier. Where in the world is the best place to go for great powder? Where is the best, place to go for trekking? Where is the best place to go for, I see you were, trained as a scuba diver. Go to the bottom and see whether or not you could get somebody, off of the business and into what's most in their heart. So thank you for that question. Here's one. Any pointers for someone who has been with a firm successfully for many years, but who decides to explore at long last the next experience growth opportunity? Yeah, set up an appointment with one of us. That would be my first point. And I think that part of it is to get really quiet and be really reflective on what's in your heart and what your values are. And I think that once you connect to your values, what's most important to you, what have you liked about your current role, your current firm, your current positions over the years with this particular company? What are the themes that you want to hang on to? What are the areas that you want to take forward with you into your next role? So I think values are really, really key, because if you are really good at your job, but you don't feel connected to it, that's really hard to get up and go into the office on Monday morning. You want to be able to find that synergy where you not only feel proud of the work that you're doing or the company that you're working for, but you feel that you are working towards the next step. And so I think that getting clear about what is most in your heart and where your values are, I think is going to be a great step for you to decide where your next experience is. So thank you for that. Okay, let's see. Any other questions?
There was a question if there's any resources to help prepare for a tech case interview.
Okay. Through Exponent, we, Kayla, I can send that link to you. And there, for anybody who was connected to tech at SOM or anyone who was connected to consulting, we had Rocket Blocks that prepared you for the casing, and you had Exponent that prepared you for the case interviews. So I think that those are really great sources to be able to tap back into if that's something that you really want to get those muscles back in sync. So Kayla, I can send that to you. Okay. What's a way to stand out with tell me about yourself, especially for consulting interviews? Maybe you can say what I know to be true about myself is X and Y. What I know is in my DNA is this. What I know about myself is that I'm a curious cat. What I know about myself is that I never take anything at face value. And maybe you can give some examples of, when, from way back when, what you were kind of destined to be in this field. What is it particularly about consulting that resonates with you deeply? And a lot of people say, oh, you can work on a lot of different projects and for a lot of different companies. I think those are, yeah. We've heard that. But I think that if you can dig a little deeper to say, why am I here? What is it about the work that has kept me here? What is it about the work that we do that solves really tricky, gnarly challenges for companies? What is it about that process that resonates and rings true for you? It doesn't for everybody, but what is it uniquely that feels right to you? Why have you stayed? It's a very, very time, I don't want to say challenging, but it's a very, very challenging balancing act to be in consulting where you're with clients, a fair amount of time. So what is it about that connection to clients, the partnership piece? There might be something that when you sit and really think about the components of the job and where you spend the most time and what aspects of your job do you love? What components make for a really successful partnership between a consultant and a client? I think that all of those are can make you stand out and make you more unique because of, again, your thoughtfulness. And again, these are great questions and ones that we can talk a little bit further about in coaching sessions or one-on-one to dive a little bit deeper into what your particular not issues, but your particular wants and needs are. Did I miss any other questions, Kayla?
Yeah, just one last quick question. We've been talking about SOM resources for networking, but are there any more global resources that people can network on, LinkedIn or other places where people should be networking?
I would say for sure, if you are interested in pivoting to a new industry or another company, like the company on LinkedIn. Follow the company on LinkedIn. Put yourself, put the alert on that you're looking, that you're open for business on LinkedIn. Have your resume refreshed, perhaps have your LinkedIn profile refreshed. There's a lot of really fabulous resources on LinkedIn that you can tap into. There are also blogs that you can look at. If and there's also, for those who are interested in the VC space, Gannon has a great blog, and he lists job opportunities. So I think that newsletters, keeping abreast of what's happening, joining particular, you can join a particular chat for an area that you're interested in, but I don't have them off the top of my head, but I would think industry newsletters are really, really good. And, obviously for those who are in finance and so forth, you're looking at Wall Street Journal, you're looking at Financial Times, you're looking at, you're checking off, those obvious bases to make sure that you are keeping abreast of what's going on in a particular company. If you see a company that is of interest to you, or you've been thinking about it, don't hesitate to look back at SOM LinkedIn and pop the particular company in the search bar and see who within the SOM network, or even in the greater Yale connection, works there or has worked there. Good people know good people. So I would suggest that even though I talk about the SOM network, I think it's an untapped resource that people can then, oh, is there anyone else? This has been really helpful. Thank you so much for spending X amount of time with me. I've really learned a lot. Is there anyone else in this particular department that you think would be a good person for me to know? It's not going to be an SOMer, but that SOMer could give you an entree into meeting with somebody from a different group or a different department or division, perhaps, or even introducing you to HR. There's all sorts of ways that the SOM connection can work. And don't get hung up on, oh, there isn't a job opening at such and such a company, or Google doesn't have anything right now. Utilize the network to say, I'm exploring right now. I'm really doing well, thank God, at my company, but I'm kind of getting, the itch to, to broaden my thought, to possibly look at other avenues down the road. And I was looking at what you've done post SOM. I'm really intrigued by your pivot from here to here. Would love to chat with you for 20 minutes just to kind of get a feel for, how you've done that, how easy or difficult that was. People are nice within the SOM network. And again, if you're saying this has been so helpful, do you think that there's anyone else for me? Yeah, my friend Joe works at XYZ company. I'll make that connection. And all of a sudden you just see that your network tree is building and building and building. And that's really what you want to do, especially when you're employed, because you can just have the coffee chats. If people are working remotely or even in some sort of hybrid mode, there is a great chance where you can do this, where you can have a quick Zoom chat or a phone chat and learn some information from somebody, even though you're saying, oh, that person doesn't do what I want to do. You never know who that person could introduce you to. Now, I know that we're at the 1 o'clock hour, and I don't want to go over our time, because I appreciate and I thank you all for being with me, being with us, and for being engaged in our session. If there's anything that you want to talk about in a more in-depth way, I encourage you to set up a one-on-one. It would be really great to be able to have this dynamic and to be able to talk about your particular situation in a more private way, obviously, and in a way that you would feel that is more helpful for you. So I encourage you to do that. So Kayla, I'm going to ask you to put the survey in the chat whenever you are ready, unless you've already done that. But I, again, thank you all very, very much for your time and for your participation today. It's been my absolute honor and pleasure to be with you. Take care.